Hey man, thanks for the follow. Nice dog, bro.
Yo, what brings you to my page?
What made you wanna follow me, bro?
Instagram appointment setting is about to change forever for coaches, consultants, agency owners, and whoever uses DMs to book appointments to grow their business. We are entering a new era. Now, the good news is that there are a bunch of new ways to win that weren't possible before. And I know this because I spent all day in the DMs or managing or training setters. And we achieve results like booking more than 100 meetings from $2,000 ad spend. And I'm starting to see trends that are not obvious to the average coach that are massive opportunities. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the biggest shift happening right now in appointment setting, why your appointment booking rate is going to go down, and your ads ain't going to fix it, a framework you should use instead, a bunch of tested openers that we are using and allow us to double the industry standards when it comes to KPIs, a bunch of follow-ups that are not going to throw people off and make them unfollow you, and last but not least, what KPIs to track. And after all of this, I'm also going to show you a bunch of real-life examples from training sessions with my setters. By the way, I'm also closing deals for myself and for other coaches, and in the last 3 months alone, I've invested more than $30,000 into the top mentors into marketing industry. And the persuasion and engagement skills that I learned are directly applicable to the appointment setting industry. What I cannot do though, unfortunately, is transferring these skills to the dating market because, as you can see, I got no birds. I was bragging a bit too much. And I've even been through a bunch of setting programs, and I'm training setters who've been through these 3, 4, 5K setting programs. And to be honest with you, the information I'm going to share in this video is more valuable than those programs. And if it's not, you can dislike this video and leave a hateful comment in the comment section. Let's get into it. The biggest shift happened after ManyChat's update that allows people to send automatic DMs to new followers. Now, don't get me wrong, people were already doing warm outreach on new followers. The problem is that now ManyChat made it even easier to do that, because still, you probably needed a VA or a setter to do warm outreach on every single new follower that comes in, especially on big profile. So even more coaches, agencies, and consultants started doing even more outreach on new followers. And what this means from a consumer's perspective is they're engaging in more conversations, meaning they are wasting more time in these conversations. They are getting pitched more often. They're jumping on calls and wasting even more time. They need to face the embarrassment of not being able to afford sometimes the service that they're getting pitched. And sometimes they get pitched, they buy, and because 90% of the programs out there are crap, they get burnt. And so their sales resistance and their guard when someone reaches out to them in the DMs is through the roof. But luckily for you, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to show you the deep psychology you can tap into to lower this guard and lower this sales resistance to still make them open up and book them in. And again, this is stuff that, by the way, I have never heard anywhere else. So what does that mean in practice? How is this shift going to affect you directly? Well, of course, your response rate is going to suffer. We've already seen, according to our data, a 7% decrease between the last days of October and the first days of November using the same message, the same opener, the same thanks for the follow opener, and the same offer and the same setter. Why? Again, because this shift is actually happening. But not only your response rate is going to suffer, like I said earlier, because their sales resistance is going to be so high, it's going to be harder to make them open up, so harder to find an anchor and dig deeper into their pain points to build leverage to then pitch the call. And follow-ups won't save you, because if you don't have the time to make them open up and build that rapport, the follow-ups are just going to annoy them. And ads won't fix the issue because they're just applying volume to a broken system. So unless you're stubborn as hell, you realized by now that something needs to change. Now, luckily for you, I developed a framework called DTCL. I couldn't find a better name, sorry. But this framework is what's going to allow you in 2025 and 2026 to come back to the good old days where nobody was doing outreach and inbound DM setting on Instagram. Let me walk you through it step by step. T stands for therapist/consultant. C stands for chess player. And L stands for lifeguard. Everything's going to fall into place. Bear with me. Let's get into it. And if something seems a bit woo-woo, don't worry, because towards the end of the video, I'm going to show some real life examples of the application of these things I'm going to walk you through. The first thing you need to do as you get into DMs is to remove this appointment setter mask, and guess what? Put on your own mask yourself. Imagine, instead of doing appointment setting, imagine that you are just on your profile scrolling through Instagram, and let's say that a bird, a nice chick, just started following you. What do? Do you message her saying thanks for the follow? If you really want to start a conversation with her? I don't think so, right? That would be kind of weird. So why are you sending thanks for the follow? Hey, are you into appointment setting in the DMs? It doesn't make sense. Use your creativity as if if the hottest chick on earth just started following you and you need to engage with her in a conversation. So avoid flattering compliments and say something that is gonna actually steal them a smile. Break the pattern. Say something that's gonna make it impossible for them not to reply. That's how you lower their sales resistance. And again, bear with me, in a moment I'm gonna show you some real life examples. After 3, 4, 5 messages, once the conversation is rolling and this person is actually interested and hooked, then you can change the frame, and from dater you can become yourself a consultant. Or if you are the appointment setter watching this video, then you just have to impersonate the person you're sending messages in behalf of. So you are a mini version of the coach, of the consultant, and you're just there to genuinely see if you can help these people. And if you can, guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna help them before you even think about pitching the call. It's all about building rapport, not by asking random questions like what's the weather like there, how is Manchester, how is London. No, you're gonna build rapport by asking smart questions related to your specific situation. And as we're gonna see in the chess player section after this one, you need to know what usually their pain points and desires are so that you can lead with questions and move the conversation towards those pain points and desires. A mistake I see all the time coaches and appointment setters making is, yes, they acknowledge the answers that the prospect give, and then they ask another question. But the question they ask is often unrelated to what the prospect said before. So it still looks like an AI model just replying to messages. Instead, personalize the questions according to what they said. And don't just acknowledge whatever they said. Feel free to go off track a little bit, right? If they said something that is actually important, even if it's not relevant to the situation and to the close, to the appointment, still, you want to go a little bit off track for a moment just to show that you're actually human and you're trying to have a conversation, a normal conversation with them, not some sort of random questionnaire. Another huge mistake I see people doing is they overthink every single reply. Again, imagine you're having a conversation with a person in real life. You don't wait 2 minutes after they said something to say something. That would be super weird. So just use the same frame. It's a normal conversation with that person. So the first thing that comes to your mind after you read their reply or their message is the thing that you should actually reply, because it's the most natural and genuine. Another interesting tip is to try and mirror their messaging style and their slang. So if they are using mate, man, bro, just use whatever they are using. So you match them. That's something that people also use in sales. For example, in sales calls, you try and mirror what the prospect is doing. So if the prospect is kind of like this, you do kind of like this, right? The way you build that rapport, you lower their guard and you lower that sales resistance is by showing them that you actually genuinely care. And you not only like them, but you are like them. So whenever you can, try and find commonalities. So if they say, for example, they start talking about their dog, just try and say something, oh really? Does yours do that as well? Mine too. Just some random little commonalities help establish that rapport. You're just there to make friends. You know probably already the importance of voice notes. Try and use as many of them as possible. And if you are the appointment setter watching this video, just get your client or the coach you're working for to create canned voice notes that you can use over and over through ManyChat, or by dragging and dropping the file in the Instagram desktop app is gonna send a message as if it was a voice note, because that's gonna build massive rapport and again lower their guard. And the key here is, again, put yourself in the prospect shoes. They are on Instagram. Why would they reply to your random messages and to your questions instead of just scrolling in the wonderful feed? Because you need to make the conversation more interesting than the feed. That's why you need to use jokes, you need to make them smile, you need to show that you care, because this way you take them away from the feed and you have them focus on the conversation and you don't lose them scrolling in the feed. Because guess what happens? If you don't message in real time, you lose them, and the more time elapses between the last message, the colder they get, the harder it is to get them back. So we talked about the dating frame and the consultant/therapist frame. Now at this point later in the conversation, it's time to implement the chess player frame. Let me explain. Most probably by now you found an anchor. What is an anchor? An anchor is simply a big pain point or a big desire that the prospect has. Once you find that, you just have to ask specific questions to make this pain point or this desire even bigger than it actually seems. But of course, you cannot say, hey yo, this is bigger, this is more important than you think. You can just ask questions to make them admit to you, but most importantly to themselves, how important this goal is or how painful this situation is. So you always want to think 2 to 3 messages ahead. We talked about not overthinking messages, but here is where you want to think critically a bit more each message, because you want to predict what answers they're gonna get. And by now you probably know this person a little bit, so you know what they're gonna say. And by imagining, by predicting what they're gonna say, you can ask specific questions to again make this pain point or desire bigger. Because here's the thing, if you don't do that, you run in the issue of getting stuck. But if you do that properly, you make them stuck. The whole goal of this part of the conversation is to put them in a boat. Imagine this, you and your prospect are on a boat. It's gonna make sense. You are the skipper and the prospect is the captain. The captain gives the skipper the the order of setting the anchor. So what this is gonna look like in the conversation is the prospect gives you an anchor. You, the skipper, starts lowering the anchor, okay? And then the boat is gonna start drifting downwind until the anchor is stuck, so that the boat is in that position. And what this is gonna be in the conversation is you asking questions to move the boat downwind, okay? And you set the anchor and then you move the boat downwind. Then if the captain wants to move from that spot, the only way they can move from there and de-anchor the anchor is by turning on the engines and moving towards the anchor and asking you, the skipper, the consultant, to get the anchor up. So what are you gonna do? What's the analogy? So essentially, if you do that, if you set an anchor and you let the boat drift downwind, you put them in a box, because now if they want to move from there, they need to ask you to help them and they need to move the boat. They need to turn on the engines, and the engines and the boats and moving the boat is an action, and the action is booking the call, right? A bit of a weird analogy, but I hope that makes sense. And please stop asking those salesy questions like, is that a priority for you to try and build urgency or scarcity or increase pain? That's not something that you would normally say in a normal conversation, is it? So avoid reconfirmation, scarcity, avoid I have a few spots left for my coaching. No, they don't care. That's not how people speak. And if you use those words and those sentences, you immediately get labeled as a salesperson and you destroy all you did before. And then you want to act a little bit like Santa Claus. What does that mean? Well, you want to give them little gifts. You want to nurture them. People like getting gifts. So whenever you can, if it's meaningful, if it's relevant, you want to give them gifts. So resources, you want to send them YouTube videos specific to the situation they're in. However, as we're going to see in a moment, you want to keep the best resources to follow up. At this point, after you've established rapport, you made the conversation interesting and you help them, it's just about offering more help. That's how simple it is. This thing called inconsistency avoidance tendency. So if people admitted to you and to themselves that they need help, they listed all their problems, they said how these problems are impacting their life and how big the pain is or how big the desire is, well, it's stupid to say no when you're offering help if you've done everything right, okay? So if you've built a big enough gap and you established enough rapport, they're gonna feel silly saying no to you offering to help them further. And make the conversation so interesting that they wanna jump on a call with you or with the coach you're setting for, not because of the value of the call or not because of the offer, but also because they just enjoy talking to you and they just wanna chat more. Think about how big of a leverage you have if you establish such a big level of rapport. And after you see you can help them, don't throw everything in the bin and say, yeah, let's jump on a call. You wanna ask it in step. You wanna let them agree on smaller commitments first. So for example, the way it's gonna look like in the conversation is after you know you can help them, you're gonna ask, well, I think I might be able to help you out with that if you would like me to. And ideally, you do that through a voice note. And then after they agree, after they say, yeah, why not? Then you ask, would you be available for a chat later this week or early next week? Or they say, yes, for sure. And then at that point, you ask, okay, shall I drop my calendar so that maybe you can, choose a time that works for you? I think it might be easier than just throwing times around. Boom. How can they not book if you frame it this way? And if you're quick at responding? It's impossible, especially if you built a big enough gap and you established rapport. So we covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the biggest shift happening right now in appointment setting and why you should adapt and react right now. And then I gave you the framework to use and implement in your appointment sequence. But now I want to actually give you some openers and follow-ups that you can plug and play into your script starting from today. So you avoid your conversion rate decreasing just because ManyChat came up with this annoying feature. And hopefully you understand by now why you shouldn't use that feature in the first place, because everybody's using it. So of course you want to avoid thanks for follow because you sound like everybody else who wasted their time and pitched them before and probably even burnt them out. What brings you to my page is probably even worse. What question is that? Do you ever ask that question? Like imagine a customer entering a shop and then the cashier approaching the customer and asking, what brings you to this shop? What do you mean? Like if I'm here it's because I need something from this shop. This is a silly random question that doesn't spark curiosity and doesn't make them want to reply and just make them like, that's weird, that's a weird question. I don't want to ask this, I don't want to talk to this person. And sticking to the shop analogy, something really annoying, at least personally, is when I enter a shop and someone approaches me and say, how can I help? I don't want your help. If I want your help, I ask your help, right? Let me just look at the items. The same thing in the DMs. If they didn't message you first, it's probably because they don't want your help yet, right? So stay there and don't say, how can I help? Because they don't want your help. I appreciate you getting in touch with me. That's another terrible one when they reply to a story or they follow a call to action or they send you an inbound. No, you don't. They appreciate you because you're gonna help them. So why are you thanking them for asking for help? That doesn't make sense. And believe it or not, even the canned voice note is that because again, there is ManyChat now and everybody's sending a canned voice note whenever someone follows. And because you want to use the dating frame, you want to avoid flattering compliments and sycophantic behavior. No, I didn't ask ChatGPT this word. I came up with it myself. Instead, try with genuine, funny story replies, genuine, funny comments, niche inner jokes. So if you're an appointment setter and you're not necessarily deeply rooted in the niche, try and just consume more content of people in that niche, or even just more content of the coach you are working for, and try and understand the inner jokes. Because if you learn their language, it's going to be much easier to resonate and to say things that are going to steal them a smile and interrupt the pattern. And like we said before in the conversation, try and find some commonalities, some common points. So if they have a dog, then say something about your dog doing the same thing as their dog, right? Just because it's easier when you have something in common to then start a conversation. Again, imagine how you made friends in real life. You probably had something in common. Maybe you hated the same person, or you liked the same sport. So if you can find something common outside your niche, that's gonna be great to connect. Because if the only thing in common you have is the niche, well, it's not really special, because they're following you because of the content you're producing in that niche. So if you can find something else, you can connect without being salesy. Because if you connect and the only thing you have in common is the niche, then guess what's gonna happen? They're gonna understand that you're just there to sell them something. So try and find something that, a common point that goes beyond just the niche you're in. I'm mentored by Sway, probably you know him, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest info guy at the minute. And his best opener is, what kind of Asian are you? And that's so smart, because it's pattern interrupting, it's easily replicable, and makes them think, sparks curiosity, and steal them a smile. And also, there is a commonality, the fact that they're Asian. So can you find something similar related to your ICP? If you can, you won. Even just what kind of runner are you, or what kind of salesperson are you? It's gonna be something a bit pattern interrupting, is gonna increase your chances of getting a reply. And another good framework that we sometimes use is something keeping you all busy, or you also find some time to think? So for example, is your puppy keeping you all busy, or you also find some time to run, for example, if we are in the running niche? So be smart, be creative, and never stop testing and iterating. I'm gonna give you in a moment that you can find in the description below my tracking sheet, and there's gonna be a section to easily split test openers. But before we dive into tracking, let's go over some follow-ups that you shouldn't and then should use. Look, I was doing outreach, cold email outreach for my agency, so I know what really throws people off. And let me know, double question marks, updates, we're able to book in? We're able to find a time? How is it going, man? Those are just so annoying. Again, put yourself in their shoes. They didn't forget. Like 80% of the time, they didn't forget. They just ghosted you. Probably because you didn't build enough rapport before. So if they're ghosting you, well, first of all, try and fix the earlier stages of the conversation to avoid even having to follow up. Because if you make the conversation so interesting and so engaging, and you build that rapport, you don't ghost your best friends. So if you build the same rapport that you have with your best friends, they're not gonna ghost you in the first place. But anyways, if they do because they forget, or because you didn't do everything perfectly, then what you should follow up with is voice notes, ideally personalized. If you can't, just get some canned voice notes. Again, very soft. Don't use, hey, let me know. No, just try and reconnect, maybe even with something they said in the conversation. And the best way to follow up by far is by sending resources. So you could say something like, yeah, I was just thinking about you and I thought that this video might be pretty helpful for you. Imagine the prospect getting this message. What? This guy really actually care about me. They were thinking about me in their daily life. That's weird. They really care. If they care, then they probably actually care even in their program. They care that I get results. Let me book in, let me start working with them. Because the thing is, you don't just want them to book. You also want them to sign up. Even if you're the appointment setter, you get paid when they actually pay. So your job is not only to book them in, but also to prime them for the call. And then lastly, if you really have to follow up with text, just use jokes. For example, if you say, in the opener, is your puppy keeping you all busy, or you're also into running, then your follow-up after that, again, always try and connect and do stuff that makes sense so that you look natural, not an AI bot. But your follow-up in that case could be, yeah, I guess your puppy is keeping you all busy, right? So you steal them a smile. It's a little joke, and it's connected and makes sense and increases your chance of getting a response. All right, now when it comes to KPIs, you can find in the description below, absolutely free, just document. You can just open it and duplicate it. The document that I use, the Excel sheet that I use to track KPIs, you can track not only KPIs, but also KPIs from ads. Because if you're running ads, you want to know exactly not only how many many views you get or how many followers you get from that ad, but you also want to know exactly how many conversations you start from prospects coming from that ad, and how many sales you make from prospects coming from that ad, and of course also how many appointments you get from people coming from that ad, so that you can make ads decisions based on actual conversion, not just based on some vanity metrics. That's really important. And there is also another sheet within that spreadsheet that allows you to split test openers or other messages in other parts of the conversation, for example in the pitch. We covered a lot, but I can guarantee you that if you implement every single strategy I covered, appointment setting isn't going to be the bottleneck anymore. However, if you still feel like prospects don't trust you or they're not warm when you start the conversation, then it's probably not because of appointment setting, it's because of your content. But no, I'm not going to pitch anything, don't worry. I'm just going to redirect you to a YouTube video I created a little while ago where I explain you how to create YouTube videos that actually work, because you probably don't have, if prospects don't trust you and are not warm enough, a strong enough middle of the funnel, and you gotta work on that, and you gotta work on your YouTube. I appreciate you watching this video. Watch that video afterwards, but don't miss the next couple of minutes, because there I explain real life examples of what I covered in this video. Really important. Sorry, I am busy running. No race coming up. I am single mother. I run with a stroller 3 times a week over a weekend. That is my longer runs and work day. It's getting cold. No winter running. Okay, in this case, boom, she's unqualified. You don't even waste your time with her. First of all, the way she replied, like there are so many elements here that should make you stop messaging to this lead. Of course, we end the conversation nicely, but we don't waste our time with this lead. Number 1, she looks super busy. Number 2, she's a single mother, so most probably she's not gonna be able to afford James's service, which is $1,500. Number 3, she's super busy. Number 4, she's gonna stop running over winter. Perfect. I can see you're super busy. Keep up your training as much as you can, and let me know if you need any help. Boom, that's it. We end it nicely, but we don't waste our time with this prospect. And you unlabel it, and you add in the spreadsheet lead disqualified 1. Okay, so before I even read your messages, let's analyze what he said. Like usually the first message or the first couple of messages are the most important. And from there, you need to set the direction for the conversation. So he's busy. He's 38. He's a runner. So he's qualified, I would say. And we can already see that he's kind of like nostalgic. He misses the times when he could run 5K in 17 minutes. So we know that during the conversation, we're gonna stress on that factor of not being able to perform as well as he used to, because that's a little pain that he gave us, a little anchor that we have, and we need to dig deeper. We're going to direct the conversation towards, does your nutrition sustain your busy lifestyle, juggling family, work, and running? That's going to be pretty much the direction. And isn't it a nutrition problem that you are not able to run a 17-minute 5K, right? So these are going to be the anchors. Now that you define the anchors, you go ahead in the conversation and you follow the roadmap that you designed for yourself. Okay, so what do we have? She's qualified because she's into fitness, weight training, functional, whatever. And she's getting back into running and she's interested. So in this case, we're not gonna ask race specific questions. She definitely is not competing. But we wanna know if her nutrition matches the demands of her lifestyle, because she's training quite a bit. What do you mainly needing help with, so I can get a better understanding? Okay, so we could use this opportunity to build a bit more rapport. Again, we want to be human, so we could make a joke on the fact he's a private chef and doesn't want to cook, for example, and then we ask the question. The question you've asked is okay, but we could ask something a bit more specific to what they said, again, to be a bit more personal. Instead of asking what you need help with, we could have asked, how are you fueling your body right now? And why do you think it's not enough? So your question is a bit out of place simply because it's obvious why he's getting meal prep, because he said he wants to try and eat healthy, and he doesn't want to cook because he doesn't want to, because he does it all day long and he doesn't have time to. So instead of asking why while you're meal prepping, we could have asked again just more specific stuff around what they're eating. So we can have a consultative approach. The conversation looks a little bit scripted. We are never really personalizing the questions we ask, and it almost looks like a robot, because if you cover the messages he's sending, his replies could be 20 messages. Almost looks like we didn't even read the message. We need to personalize the questions more, and you're gonna get a completely different answer. We are not building enough rapport to make them open up.